So what now? Now that you understand this, first, never try to time the market in general. Never try to time a bubble or jump in and out in general. It's statistically always best to just consistently dollar cost average. Personally, I don't even watch the news. I don't pay attention to macro events. I don't pay attention to politics. It's all a waste of energy because the statistics will show that dollar cost averaging is the most effective strategy regardless, even if you time the bottoms perfectly. It's a pretty impressive statistic. However, you can make intelligent decisions with your investment choices. One obvious thing is to diversify, of course, but to be more specific, I would encourage you to stay away from a lot of these more speculative investments that have a lot of exposure to AI. I would encourage you to stay away from the OpenAI IPO when that happens. And this even extends to companies that create infrastructure for AI, companies that create the memory for AI, like Micron and all them. You know, they had their ride up, and I even explained this ride up to some of my friends, and I told them, you know, there's a gamble with this, but if you want to ride it, you could, because from my business, we saw that there were prices changing for a lot of the memory, so we noticed this pretty early on, so I let some of them know, but I still don't see them as long-term investments at all. That's more of just like a short-term gamble thing, and I think it's done. I think the chickens are coming home to roost with that. So instead of investments like that, I would say you should look into companies that are going to benefit from AI use, especially with all the competition in AI, how cheap AI use is going to get for these companies. And so it's going to lead to this complete inverse effect where these software companies that were falsely punished because people thought they would be replaced completely by AI, like these AI businesses that would just pop up, they're actually going to benefit from leveraging AI. And this is what they've been trying to say on their earnings calls for the longest time. But I think we're going to finally see the market starting to correct itself there. And a lot of these software companies that have great fundamentals are going to start, the market's going to start acting more rational around them. And to show you where my mindset was about a year ago, this same kind of concept I saw with Google, how there was like all the overhyped fear of AI impacting Google's search moat. I saw a really great opportunity with Google, and now it's the majority of my portfolio, Google and Amazon. I'll try to find some text messages so you know I'm not just talking out my ass, but this will give you an insight into like how my mind works and like where I was thinking about a year ago, you know, like during the tariff scares. Google was what I was really trying to push to all my friends and family. And I'm really glad I did, and I'm really glad I made it such a big part of my portfolio. I don't think the same opportunity is there, but I'm still keeping it in my portfolio. I'm just shifting now my dollar cost averaging into where I see more opportunity, and I believe now the opportunity is shifting into the heavily punished software companies that AI was supposed to replace. But something that people forget is that these companies have a wide moat with their IP and with all the data they have. I don't want to list too many examples of companies, but I need to like help you understand, I guess. So one company on my radar, for instance, would be Intuit. But obviously there's so many of these companies out there. You know, Intuit might not do well, but it's just one example to give you guys the idea. Like what's another, you know, like Duolingo, I think, is another one that's kind of been falsely punished by this narrative and overhype. But with all that said, you know, here's the thing. Here's the thing with investing. The market, what's the saying? The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent.
So why doesn't the market just spot this immediately? That's the second idea. A professor named Robert Bloomfield has a nice explanation that he calls the incomplete revelation hypothesis. In theory, a market instantly prices in all public information, but Bloomfield's point is that public and usable are not the same thing. The number you need is technically out there. It's on page 83 of a 200-page filing, split across 4 footnotes in a form you have to reassemble yourself. And extracting it costs time, effort, and attention, which aren't free. So the harder a fact is to dig out, the less completely it shows up in the price. It isn't that the information is hidden, it's that reading it is annoying and most people don't bother, which is the entire game. The debt isn't hidden, it's just filed somewhere tedious enough that you won't look. At which point, you might reasonably ask, fine, but if there's money to be made reading the footnotes, why don't the professionals just do it? Read the filing, short the overpriced stock, and collect. And that's the third idea, the limits of arbitrage, a field that the economists Mitchell and Polvino did much of the foundational work on. The problem with being right about a footnote is that being right isn't enough. You also have to stay solvent long enough for everyone else to catch up. If you short a beloved narrative stock because you found an ugly commitment buried in the accounts and a few million people buy it anyway because they like the founder, that stock can keep climbing for a very long time. And your short position can wipe you out well before the market ever gets around to caring. The smart money is aware of this, so a lot of the time it simply doesn't bother getting involved in hype stocks at all. The mispricing survives not because nobody can see it, but because the people who can see it can't afford to bet against the people who can't. Which pulls the whole thing together. The people not reading the accounts outnumber the people who are. The people who are reading them can't move the price on their own. And so, a company that buries an inconvenient number in a footnote is making a perfectly rational bet that the crowd won't read it, and the professionals who do won't be able to do much about it. It's disclosed, it's legal, and it works often enough to maybe be worth doing. So, to bring this all together, the current panic over hidden tech debt isn't the discovery of the next Enron. It's people finally reading the footnotes and realizing how much money is actually being spent.
And that's the tricky thing with alpha, guys. Tech Lead actually made a great point about this in his last video. So, credit where credit's due. He's a grifter, but he has some good takes. So, I'll still fucking quote him. But he was explaining how, alpha takes time to be realized. Michael Burry's a perfect example of this. He had the alpha with the big short, but he was 2 years early, and he almost imploded. Almost. The timing ended up being just in time, though, and it paid off big time for him. And now he tried to short NVIDIA like last year in 2025, but a bit too early. I think he was 2.5 years early to the big short of mortgage-backed securities. So, if that timing lines up, that means by the time we get to the OpenAI short, the OpenAI IPO might be the same kind of timing. It's funny, people repeat the same behavioral patterns, could end up lining up with the market, It's a funny thought. So yeah, don't try to time the market, but be smart with your investments. Google and Amazon are by far my biggest positions, but I've now stopped dollar cost averaging into them, and I'm going to start shifting it into these falsely punished software companies. And again, don't try to time the market, but just for fun, I think I'll put out a prediction out there. I think the AI bubble is going to pop sometime after the OpenAI IPO. And I think it's going to be an anticlimactic pop. I think it'll lead to, a very, minor bear market. And I think you're going to see a gradual shift of investments into the safer blue chip companies. Even some of these software companies that were heavily discounted because of this overhyped narrative, but most above all, definitely the Mag 7. And I could see like Google, and some of these other companies being those companies who kind of swept in, cleaned up the rubble after OpenAI spent so much money, creating all this technology. They come in and they just take all the benefits. But what this is going to end up leading to then, I think, is a nifty 50 situation where there's overconfidence in the Mag 7. So perhaps 2 to 3 years post-bubble pop, we might see a nifty 50-like crash in the Mag 7, which I think would be significantly more severe. It's like this whole build-up, post-crypto crash, post-AI crash, like all that is getting shifted into this. And then we're going to have a severe economic downturn and bear market. I think that's the most likely turnout. So yeah, I think this AI bubble pop is going to be very anticlimactic. Instead, it'll be more of like a gradual transition of funds, a gradual transition and shift. And yeah, I just trying to position myself ahead of it, that's all. But not trying to time any crash or whatever. Yeah, that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed.
Here's the thing about alpha. Fundamentally, alpha is a market mispricing, something you know that the market does not, and the paradox is that real alpha often feels terrible in the short term when you're going against the crowd, suffering quarterly losses with chronic second guessing of yourself. Your performance may look bad for months or even years because alpha is fundamentally that market mispricing that only you see. That discomfort and short-term pain is exactly the filter. If your positions were winning already, the market has already discovered the alpha and the trade becomes crowded. The thing is, alpha requires having the capital to hold through such volatility and short-term losses in order to capture that longer-term horizon gain.